It's hard to complain when a company makes its product better rather than worse. But the improvements that My Arcade tends to roll out for these products a few months after they first ship entails the peculiar problem that almost all of the reviews on YouTube are inaccurate and misleading, because in general, reviewers want to cover these things the moment they come out. It is actually quite hard to be well informed about this seemingly simple line of products in 2023 and 2024. I'm going to discuss a number of issues with the screen that no other YouTube channel has actually explained to the audience. I'm going to go over the ways in which previous reviews by people like Gen X Gamer and Mad Little Pixel are actually kind of misleading and false. And I'm going to discuss also the difficulties you may encounter if you're looking to buy the sequels to these models that are coming out now in 2023 and 2024. But first things first, let me just point out, you have an alternative to this technology already in your pocket. If you wanted to, you could be playing Xevious on your mobile phone, and your mobile phone could be plugged into any number of controllers with a higher quality D-pad, obviously a higher quality screen, so on and so forth. But would you actually play it? The basic premise of purchasing such a device is that you will not take the time to whip out and use your cell phone or your laptop computer or anything else of the kind to actually play Xevious for all of 2 minutes, or to play Pac Man for, 30 seconds. The nature of these classic games is such that the convenience factor, not just of the plastic housing, but of being able to whip it out, turn it on, and turn it off, no save states, no OS, no menu, no other complications, that really is the selling point of the product. And oh yeah, did you forget? There's a perfectly good version of Pac Man, an excellent version of Ms. Pac Man actually, available for ye olde Game Boy. But if you had it on a Game Boy, would you actually play it? So version 1.0 of this copy of Pac Man had a peculiar problem. When you completed a level and started a new level, it would play the jingle, it would play the short song that's only supposed to be heard at the beginning of level 1. And of course, this is a hint at the extent to which this is not an authentic arcade ROM, but is to some extent an original creation or recreation meant just to run on this hardware. There was a list of other hardware and software problems that reviewers on YouTube pointed out. But guess what? When I bought this, each and every one of those problems invisibly had been solved. Why do I say invisibly? Because there's nothing on the packaging that says like there's version 1.0 and version 2.0 of this product. If you're standing in a store staring at this thing in a box, you have no way of knowing if you're buying it before the improvements were made or after. The problems, by the time you see this video, may already be solved, but when you go to the store to buy one of these things, you don't know which version you are going to get. Now, I do understand also that part of the mystique, part of the appeal of this line of product is the idea that you would be playing an arcade version of the game, an arcade ROM, theoretically, rather than a home version, such as the NES version that you see here. And you know what the truth is? In many, many cases, the home version of the game is actually better than the arcade version. And you've been insensate to it because you've been using a reasonably awful controller. Pac Man, any version of Pac Man or Ms. Pac Man will be terrible with this D-pad and will be wonderful with an arcade quality joystick, Sanwa Seimitsu. So this is something that's kind of difficult to be honest with yourself about. What you're missing, what it is you're buying, the value you think you're paying for. Is it really the difference made by the ROM, or is it the difference made by the control scheme? Because obviously this D-pad, it's a reasonable D-pad. It's not terrible. What are you going to compare it to? This? Nintendo DS? Nintendo 3DS? a large part of the arcade experience is something you can never have in a pocket player. A much overrated company called M2, who are hailed by many as the saviors of retro gaming, made a pixel-perfect, arcade-accurate version of not only Pac Man, but also Xevious for the Nintendo DS. And guess what? If you owned this setup, you would never play it. It's an absolutely miserable way to play the arcade ROMs. Yes, partly due to that D-pad, partly due to the whole form factor, but partly just because the arcade ROMs really aren't all that great. I would much rather play the NES or Famicom version of either one of those games, especially if the control scheme is better. The last thing, and quite possibly the single most important thing I have to discuss, screen quality problems. Every YouTuber says something different and incoherent and confusing about what exactly the issue is with these screens. Screen tearing. Is it a problem? Yes. Is it a problem for Pac Man? No. Because Pac Man, there's so little movement on the screen, you could not possibly see or experience any screen tearing. The unique form of flickering, referred to as shimmering in video game emulation circles. Is that a problem? Yes. Is it a problem for Galaga? No. There just isn't enough motion. There isn't enough complexity in the background for you to ever perceive shimmering as a problem with Galaga. However, for a contrasting example, this handheld, the original Pac Man My Arcade handheld, it includes the Sega Genesis ROM for Pac-Mania. And that is unplayably awful and will give you a headache and hurt your eyes because of those two factors. Because of screen tearing and shimmering. So now you have to ask yourself, would you want to own a portable version of Mega Man? That's out now, 2023, if it has both shimmering and screen tearing. Would you want to own the Genesis ROM for Street Fighter 2? Probably it looks okay when the camera is still, but not when it scrolls to the left or scrolls to the right. And by the way, you have to look carefully. This includes the NES ROM for Xevious. You do get both shimmering and screen tearing in Xevious, but graphically the game is so simple, you have to make an effort to notice it. Whereas with some other games, it would be impossible to ignore. The type of screen they used here, I would guess speculatively, was designed for scientific instruments rather than video games. Why do I say that? It is very fundamentally different from what you have on a cell phone screen in that it has been designed to give you blacker blacks. So that matters for a game like Galaga, matters for a game like Pac Man. You don't want a glowing, bright, black background. It would also matter for a classic game like Joust, say, with a flat, black background. They achieved this on a microscopic level in a manner very different from a cell phone or flat screen TV. And the result is that there are good viewing angles from some directions, but not others. As you turn it left to right, the whole image seems to disappear, become impossible to see properly in a manner that will seem shocking and strange to you if you're accustomed to a cellular phone. However, when you're looking at it straight on, when you have your head and face at just the right angle, you get blacker blacks and thus a better contrast between the background and the foreground of these classic games. Now again, is this a bad thing for Galaga or Pac Man? Works great. It works fine for Galaga and Pac Man. If your girlfriend is sitting next to you watching you play Pac Man from a different angle, that's another story. She may not be able to see the screen nearly as well as she could see a cell phone screen in your hand because of this peculiar technology they have. Now, would you want to play Mega Man with that kind of screen? Would you want to play Street Fighter 2? And let's remind ourselves, all of these are one-player only devices. There's no link cable. And by contrast, the original Game Boy version of Pac Man, black and white Game Boy, has a link cable, two-player version of the game, which is excellent. It's a unique two-player version. It's needless to say, there are other versions of games like Street Fighter that have two-player capability. You're signing up for a one-player only experience with this somewhat uniquely flawed screen. So I do think what's happened in 2023 is that My Arcade has taken a good idea for a very limited range of products, and they've expanded those products into other areas where the fundamental technology they signed up for, this screen with this resolution, with these peculiar features, they've extended the mission and mandate and scope of what the My Arcade player was supposed to be into other areas where it can only disappoint you, in which it can only fail. I'm not planning to buy any more of these things, but I'll raise the question. Will it work well for Atari 2600 games? Possibly.